The streets of Yharnam have never felt more alive than when you're losing your mind. At 99 insight, the veil between worlds has worn so thin it might as well not exist at all. Every shadow pulses with intent. Every corner hides truths that were never meant for human eyes. And somewhere, always somewhere, just beyond your vision, a baby cries endlessly into the night, a sound that no one else seems to hear, a sound that exists only for those who have gazed too deeply into the abyss of understanding. Welcome, fellow seekers, to another deep exploration with King 7 lore, where today we're venturing into one of gaming's most fascinating psychological horror mechanics. We're going to discover what really happens when you push Bloodborne's insight to its absolute limit. When you accumulate 99 points of forbidden knowledge and transform from a mere hunter into something that exists between sanity and revelation. This isn't just about numbers on a screen or mechanical difficulty spikes. This is about the price we pay for truth, both in Yharnam's plague-ridden streets and in the deeper, more troubling questions about what it means to truly understand our reality. Picture yourself standing in Cathedral Ward with maximum insight. The familiar Gothic architecture remains, but everything has changed. Where once stood empty air, massive amygdalas now cling to the buildings like parasitic gods, their countless eyes tracking your every movement. They've always been there, of course, watching, waiting, existing just beyond the perception of those blessed with ignorance. But you can see them now. You can see everything. The messengers, those helpful little creatures that seemed so innocuous before, now reveal themselves operating the very mechanisms of the world, pulling levers, manipulating reality in ways that suggest they're far more than simple servants. And that crying, that endless, mournful crying of an infant that echoes through every district, every darkened alley, every moment of what should be silence. This is what Bloodborne does differently from every other game that's attempted to quantify madness or knowledge. Where other games might simply adjust difficulty sliders or swap enemy placements, From Software created a mechanic that fundamentally alters not just what you fight, but what you perceive, what you understand, and ultimately what you become. The journey from 0 to 99. Insight mirrors the path walked by every scholar of Byrgenwerth, every member of the healing church who sought communion with the cosmos, every poor soul who traded their humanity for a glimpse of truth. The question isn't whether you should accumulate this much insight, it's whether you can handle what comes with it. Because in Yharnam, knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is transformation, and transformation is rarely kind to those who experience it. If you're finding value in this descent into madness already, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. It makes a real difference in helping this video reach fellow hunters through YouTube's algorithm. Your support means everything and helps keep these deep investigations into gaming's darkest corners coming. Now, let's explore how this all began, back when Byrgenwerth scholars first discovered that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The story of insight begins long before the player-hunter ever sets foot in Yharnam, in the hallowed halls of Byrgenwerth, an institution of learning that would become the birthplace of humanity's greatest mistake. Master Willem, the provost of this college, led an expedition into the ancient Pthumerian labyrinths beneath the city catacombs that predated human civilization, carved by a race that had long since fallen to the same truths that would soon consume Yharnam. What they found down there in the darkness changed everything. The scholars discovered something that the game refers to as the Eldritch Truth, though this phrase barely scratches the surface of what they actually encountered. According to the most reliable translations and lore analyses, the truth isn't simply information that can be written down or spoken aloud. The truth is a state of being, a fundamental restructuring of how consciousness interprets reality. Imagine living your entire life perceiving only 3 dimensions, only to suddenly become aware that existence operates on far more planes than your brain was ever designed to process. The human mind, evolved to handle the simple challenges of survival, finds itself suddenly forced to comprehend geometries that shouldn't exist, beings that occupy multiple realities simultaneously. and the horrible realization that humanity exists at the bottom of a cosmic food chain it never knew existed. Master Willem understood the danger immediately. His famous adage, "We are thinking on the basest of planes. What we need are more eyes," wasn't metaphorical. He literally believed that human physiology needed to evolve, that we needed to develop new organs of perception to safely process these higher truths. The eye, after all, is just an organ that translates light into electrical signals the brain can interpret. What organs would we need to perceive dimensions beyond the third? What new neural pathways would have to form to comprehend the incomprehensible? If you're finding this exploration valuable so far, consider subscribing to support the channel and join our growing community of lore enthusiasts. Your support truly makes these deep investigations into gaming's most intricate narratives possible. Together, we're uncovering the stories that make these worlds so unforgettable. But Willem's student, Laurence, had different ideas. Where Willem sought gradual evolution to understanding, Laurence saw a shortcut in the old blood discovered in those same tombs. Why struggle to grow eyes on the inside when you could simply consume the essence of beings that already possessed higher consciousness? This fundamental disagreement split Byrgenwerth apart and gave birth to the Healing Church, an organization that would transform blood ministration into a religion and doom Yharnam in the process. Yet both paths, Willem's pursuit of insight and Laurence's blood communion, led to the same result: madness, transformation, and the complete breakdown of what we understand as human existence. The game mechanics of insight reflect this philosophical divide perfectly. Every point of insight you gain represents a step closer to Willem's ideal of elevated consciousness, but it also demonstrates why his approach was just as doomed as Laurence's. The more you understand, the more vulnerable you become to frenzy, that special type of damage that represents your mind literally breaking under the weight of comprehension. It's not random that the enemies who inflict frenzy, the Winter Lanterns, the brain of Mensis, are associated with eyes and perception. They're showing you things your mind cannot process, forcing revelations that shatter sanity like glass. Let's examine exactly what happens at each threshold of insight, because From Software designed these changes with deliberate care. At just one point of insight, the plain doll in the hunter's dream awakens. This might seem like a simple gameplay gate to prevent sequence breaking, but consider what it means narratively. The doll only exists for those who have begun to perceive beyond the veil. She's not sleeping when you have zero insight. From your perspective, she simply doesn't exist as anything more than an inanimate object. Your first glimpse of the impossible brings her to life, or perhaps more accurately, allows you to perceive the life that was always there. At 15 insight, the world begins to shift in subtle but significant ways. The church servants in Cathedral Ward suddenly wield flame-wreathed weapons, their crude clubs and torches now burning with an otherworldly fire that deals additional damage. But here's what's fascinating. The fire was always there. These enemies haven't gained new powers, you've gained the ability to perceive the true nature of their weapons. The church has always been wielding supernatural force against the beasts of Yharnam. You just couldn't see it before. This is also when Gehrman begins to reveal his torment. Approach him sleeping in the hunter's dream with 15 or more insight, and you'll hear him muttering in his sleep, begging Willem and Laurence to free him from his endless nightmare. "Oh, Laurence, Master Willem, somebody help me." "Unshackle me, please. Anybody. I've had enough of this dream. These aren't random nightmares." Gehrman is reaching out across time and space, calling to friends who have long since transformed beyond humanity, trapped in a prison that exists outside normal reality. The fact that you need insight to hear his plea suggests that his words exist on a frequency that unawakened minds simply cannot detect. At 40 insight, the amygdalas become visible. These massive, spider-like great ones have been clinging to Yharnam's architecture all along, their countless eyes observing the city's descent into beasthood with alien indifference. The revelation that these beings have been present the entire time, invisible and watching, transforms every previous encounter in the game. Every time you walked beneath a seemingly empty archway, an amygdala was there. Every moment you thought you were alone, you weren't. The paranoia this induces is exactly what high insight should feel like. The dawning realization that the world is far more populated and dangerous than you ever imagined. Reaching 50 insight reveals another disturbing truth. The messengers are everywhere, operating the mechanical elements of the world. Watch carefully as they pull the lever to open the Grand Cathedral's gates, their tiny forms straining with effort that seems almost comical until you realize the implications. If messengers are operating the infrastructure of Yharnam, who controls the messengers? How much of what seems like simple mechanical cause and effect is actually being manipulated by entities from beyond the veil? The reliability of physical reality itself comes into question. But it's at 60 insight that Bloodborne delivers its most unsettling revelation. A baby's cry begins to echo through Yharnam, a sound that has no source, no direction, yet seems to come from everywhere at once. Players have searched extensively for this crying infant, but it doesn't exist in any physical sense. The crying is the sound of Murgo, the infant, great one whose fate remains mysteriously tragic, whose consciousness exists in the nightmare of Mensis, bleeding through into reality for those whose perception has expanded enough to hear across dimensional boundaries. The crying never stops. It follows you through boss fights, through quiet moments of exploration, through every second of your time in Yharnam. It's the sound of a god that was never born, mourning its own existence, and only those approaching madness can hear it. At 99 insight, you've reached the absolute pinnacle of human perception, and the game makes you pay for it. Your frenzy resistance plummets to almost nothing. A single glimpse of a winter lantern can fill your frenzy meter instantly, causing massive damage as your brain literally hemorrhages from trying to process what you're seeing. Your beasthood stat, which represents your capacity to give in to primitive violence, drops to its minimum. You cannot embrace the beast because you've become too aware, too conscious of the cosmic horror surrounding you to ever return to that simple animalistic state. This inverse relationship between insight and beasthood reveals one of Bloodborne's core themes, ignorance as a form of protection. The beasts of Yharnam, for all their horror, are free from the existential dread that comes with understanding. They've devolved, certainly, but in doing so they've escaped the burden of comprehension. The player with 99 insight exists at the opposite extreme, so evolved in perception that every moment becomes torture. The enemies you face transform as well, though not in the way many players initially believe. Extensive testing by the community has proven that insight doesn't actually make bosses stronger or give them new movesets, with one crucial exception, the Witches of Hemwick. At 0 insight, these witches cannot summon their mad ones, making the fight significantly easier. It's a brilliant piece of game design that rewards either extreme complete ignorance or total awareness, while punishing those who exist in the middle ground of partial understanding. But beyond the witches, the changes are more subtle and psychological. Church servants become more aggressive, not because the game is cheating, but because you can now see the true nature of their attacks. The cosmic horror becomes more apparent. The environment itself seems more oppressive, more alien, more wrong. The game hasn't gotten harder in a traditional sense. It's become more honest about what you're actually facing. Consider what this means for the hunter's journey. At the beginning of the game, you're told you've come to Yharnam for pale blood, though what that means remains deliberately vague. As you accumulate insight, you begin to understand that pale blood isn't a substance but a state of being, a transformation that transcends the physical. The doll tells you to seek pale blood to transcend the hunt, but transcendence requires understanding, and understanding requires insight, and insight brings madness. It's a perfectly crafted catch. 22. That mirrors the fate of every scholar who sought truth in Yharnam. The winter lanterns deserve special attention as the ultimate expression of what high insight represents. These enemies, with their bulbous heads made of messengers and their haunting lullabies, inflict frenzy just by looking at you. But here's the disturbing part. They're singing a distorted version of the plain doll's theme. These creatures are connected to the hunter's dream, to the doll, to the very systems that are supposed to be helping you. The more insight you have, the faster their gaze destroys you, because you're seeing them for what they really are. Amalgamations of helpful spirits twisted into weapons of madness. The brain suckers present another facet of insight's curse. These creatures don't just damage you, they literally steal your insight, sucking it out with their grotesque proboscises. But consider this. What if they're not attacking you but trying to save you? What if these creatures, transformed students of Byrgenwerth based on their proximity to the college, are attempting to reduce your insight to protect you from the fate they suffered? Their grab attack whispers of mercy killing, of entities that understand too well the burden of knowledge. The items that grant insight tell their own story of Yharnam's downfall. Madman's knowledge, the most common insight-granting consumable, is described as skull of a madman touched by the wisdom of the great ones. You're literally consuming the crystallized insanity of those who came before, ingesting their revelations and their madness in equal measure. The Great One's wisdom, a rarer variant, comes directly from the Great Ones themselves, offering 2 insight instead of 1. Double the knowledge, double the contamination of your humanity. Blood echoes, the gain's currency and experience system, take on new meaning at high insight. These aren't just souls or points, they're literally the echoes of blood, the resonance of all the old blood consumed throughout Yharnam's history. Every echo you absorb carries with it fragments of memory, pieces of consciousness from those who've fallen. At 99 insight, you can perceive these echoes more clearly, understanding that you're not just growing stronger, but becoming a composite entity, a walking repository of Yharnam's collective trauma. The research hall in the DLC provides the most disturbing example of what happens to those who seek insight without restraint. The patients here, former scholars of the healing church, have been transformed into living experiments in perception. Some have elongated heads, their skulls literally stretched to accommodate more eyes. Others have become the living failures, their bodies twisted into cosmic shapes that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. Lady Maria, who guards them, committed suicide rather than continue participating in these experiments. But even death couldn't free her from the knowledge she'd gained. She exists now in the hunter's nightmare, forever guarding the secret of what the church did to those who volunteered to have their insight forcibly expanded. The character of Micolash, host of the nightmare, represents the ultimate endpoint of the insight journey. He achieved what Master Willem only theorized, complete communion with a Great One, in his case, Kos, or as he says, Kosam. But look at what he's become, a madman running through an endless nightmare of his own creation, spouting half-coherent philosophy while his body remains in Yahargul, mummified and surrounded by the corpses of his followers. His boss fight forces you to chase him through a maze that represents the labyrinthine nature of expanded consciousness. He's achieved enlightenment, but at the cost of everything that made him human. "Grant us eyes, grant us eyes!" Micolash screams as you fight him, echoing Master Willem's philosophy taken to its logical extreme. "Plant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy." He's not wrong. The eyes do cleanse beastly idiocy. They replace it with cosmic horror, with the understanding that humanity is insignificant, that our reality is just one layer of an infinite, uncaring cosmos populated by beings whose existence makes our own seem like a temporary accident. Ludwig's transformation offers another perspective on insight's cost. Once the church's greatest hunter, Ludwig discovered the Moonlight Greatsword, which he claimed showed him the way. His insight came not from study, but from communion with this artifact of the cosmos. In his transformed state, he's become a horse-like beast. But when he recovers his sword mid-battle, he momentarily regains his humanity, or at least, his memory of it. "Good hunter of the church," he asks, after you defeat him, "have you seen the thread of light?" He's still searching for meaning in the insight that destroyed him, still believing that the knowledge was worth the transformation. The choir, the highest-ranking members of the healing church, sought insight through communion with Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. This great one, found in the chalice dungeons and brought to the grand cathedral, became their source of cosmic knowledge. But Ebrietas is described as left behind by the other great ones. She's a failed god, unable to ascend to wherever her kind went. The choir learned their truth from a broken deity, gaining insight that was itself incomplete. No wonder their experiments in the research hall and the orphanage produced only monsters and madmen. The school of Menses took yet another approach, attempting to use Murgo, the stillborn Great One, to create a bridge to the cosmos. Their ritual in Yaharagul killed everyone in the district instantly, their bodies frozen in positions of agony, their consciousness pulled into the nightmare. The survivors became the shadows of Yharnam, their humanity completely subsumed by their transformation into servants of Queen Yharnam. They achieved their goal of contact with the Great Ones, but the contact destroyed them so thoroughly that only shadows remained. Rom, the vacuous spider, presents perhaps the most tragic case of insight's burden. Once a student of Byrgenwerth, Rom was transformed by Master Willem into a Great One, or at least something approaching one. But the transformation left Rom vacuous, empty-minded, acting on instinct rather than intelligence. Here's the cruel irony. Rom's lack of intelligence is what allows her to serve as a barrier between the human world and the cosmic realm. She holds back the blood moon and the true horror of the cosmos, not through power but through ignorance. Her empty mind can withstand the pressure of holding reality together precisely because she doesn't understand what she's doing. When you kill Rom, you're not just defeating a boss, you're shattering the last barrier between Yharnam and the cosmos. The blood moon rises, the Great Ones descend, and reality begins to break down completely. Your insight allowed you to see that Rom needed to die for you to progress, but was that knowledge worth the consequences? The crying of Murgo intensifies, the amygdalas become active rather than merely observant, and the world transforms into something far more dangerous and unstable. Players who maintain 99 insight through their entire playthrough report a fundamentally different game experience. The constant crying of the infant creates a persistent psychological pressure that colors every moment. The reduced frenzy resistance means that entire areas become nearly impossible to navigate without careful planning. The cathedral ward, once a safe hub, feels oppressive with the visible amygdalas looming overhead. Even the hunter's dream, supposedly a sanctuary, becomes unsettling as you realize the doll's true nature and Gehrman's eternal imprisonment. The community has developed specific strategies for high insight runs, treating them as unofficial hard modes. Players stack frenzy resistance through armor and runes, carry sedatives constantly, and learn to speed through areas with winter lanterns. But these mechanical adaptations miss the point. Playing at 99 insight isn't about overcoming a challenge. It's about experiencing the game as From Software intended for those who fully embrace the cosmic horror theme. Every death to frenzy, every moment of panic when the baby's crying intensifies, every glimpse of something that shouldn't exist. These aren't obstacles to overcome, but experiences to endure. The sedatives you use to reduce frenzy have their own disturbing implications. These items calm the nerves, according to their description, but what they're really doing is forcing your mind to reject what it's perceiving. You're chemically inducing ignorance, temporarily lowering your ability to process the cosmic truth to survive its presence. It's a perfect metaphor for how humanity deals with existential horror through denial, medication, and willful ignorance. The relationship between insight and the game's multiple endings adds another layer of meaning. To achieve the true ending where you become an infant. Great One, you need to consume 3 third umbilical cords, items that grant massive insight and represent the most direct communion with the cosmos possible. But consuming these items doesn't make you powerful in any traditional sense. Instead, you become a slug-like infant, helpless and dependent on the doll for care. Maximum insight leads not to godhood, but to a complete restart of existence, a return to innocence that's also a form of cosmic transcendence. Gehrman offers to kill you and free you from the dream, and at low insight, this might seem like mercy. But at 99 insight, you understand what he's really offering, a return to ignorance, an escape from the burden of knowledge. You will die, forget the dream, and awake under the morning sun, he promises. Forgetting the dream means forgetting everything you've learned, all the insight you've accumulated. It's a reset button on consciousness itself. The moon presence, the true final boss for those who refuse Gehrman's offer and have consumed the umbilical cords, can only be perceived and fought by those with sufficient insight. This Great One has been manipulating the entire hunt, using Gehrman and the hunter's dream to eliminate other Great Ones who might challenge its supremacy. But here's the cosmic joke. By gaining enough insight to see through its manipulation, you become eligible to replace it. The cycle continues, with you as the new infant. Great One, presumably to grow and eventually manipulate future hunts yourself. The lore implications extend beyond just the player's journey. Every character who achieved high insight in Bloodborne's history met a terrible fate. Master Willem sits motionless by the lake at Byrgenwerth, his body sprouting eyes, his consciousness seemingly absent. Laurence became the first cleric beast, his skull now a flaming reminder of his failure. Micolash exists in an eternal nightmare of his own making. Ludwig became a horse monster. The choir ascended to become the cosmic kin, losing their humanity entirely. Not a single character who sought insight found happiness or peace, only transformation, madness, or death. This pattern reflects the core influence of H.P. Lovecraft on Bloodborne's design. Lovecraft wrote, "The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents." Bloodborne takes this concept and gamifies it, making the correlation of forbidden knowledge a measurable mechanic. Every point of insight is another correlation, another connection between disparate pieces of cosmic truth that the human mind was never meant to make. The genius of the insight system is how it mirrors the player's actual journey of understanding. Your first playthrough, likely done at low to moderate insight, presents Bloodborne as a gothic horror game about hunting beasts. But as you gain both mechanical insight and actual understanding of the lore, the game transforms into cosmic horror. The beasts become the least of your concerns. The real horror is the infrastructure of reality itself, the Great Ones pulling strings, the cycles of hunts and dreams that trap consciousness in endless loops. Speedrunners and challenge runners have discovered that zero insight runs create an entirely different game, one where ignorance truly is bliss. Without insight, many of the game's most disturbing elements simply don't exist from your perspective. The doll never awakens, so you can never level up, but you also never have to confront what she represents. The amygdalas remain invisible, so their constant surveillance doesn't weigh on your mind. The baby never cries, so you're spared that constant reminder of cosmic suffering. It's Bloodborne stripped down to its most basic elements. Just a hunter fighting beasts in a plagued city, never knowing the true horror lurking beneath. But the game pushes back against this willful ignorance. Mandatory bosses grant insight that you cannot avoid. The blood moon will rise regardless of whether you can see the amygdalas. The truth exists whether you acknowledge it or not, and Bloodborne ensures you must confront at least some of it to progress. You can minimize your exposure to cosmic truth, but you cannot escape it entirely. The question Bloodborne poses through its insight mechanic is whether knowledge itself is a form of violence. Every revelation damages you, either directly through frenzy or indirectly through increased vulnerability. The scholars of Byrgenwerth committed violence against themselves and their society by seeking truth. The healing church transformed blood ministration into a religion that destroyed Yharnam, all in pursuit of communion with the cosmos. The player, in accumulating insight, perpetuates this cycle of intellectual violence, becoming both victim and perpetrator. At 99 insight, you exist in the state of maximum comprehension and maximum vulnerability. You see everything, the amygdalas, the messengers, the true forms of enemies, the connections between dimensions. But this sight comes at the cost of stability. Your mind constantly threatens to shatter. Simple enemies become existential threats. The environment itself seems hostile. not through any change in layout, but through your understanding of what every shadow might hide. The crying that permeates Yharnam at high insight deserves further examination. This isn't just ambient sound design, it's a constant reminder that somewhere, across dimensional boundaries, a consciousness suffers eternally. Murgo, the source of the crying, exists in a state of perpetual death and undeath, a great one that never fully formed but whose consciousness persists. Every character in Yharnam who hears this crying is being forced to acknowledge this suffering, to carry the weight of knowing that gods can suffer just as mortals do, that ascension doesn't mean escape from pain. Players report that extended sessions at 99 Insight create genuine psychological discomfort. The crying becomes oppressive, the constant threat of frenzy creates anxiety. The visible amygdalas make previously safe spaces feel threatening. This isn't poor game design, it's perfect game design for what Bloodborne is trying to achieve. It's making you feel, in some small way, what the characters in the game feel. The burden of insight isn't just mechanical, it's emotional and psychological. The item descriptions at high insight take on new meaning as well. Madman's knowledge talks about touching the wisdom of the great ones, but at 99 insight you understand that touching is too gentle a word. The wisdom doesn't touch you. It invades, corrupts, transforms. The insight shop in the hunter's dream, where you can spend insight as currency, becomes a relief valve, a way to literally sell off your comprehension for material goods. It's perhaps the most cynical mechanic in the game, trading enlightenment for equipment, wisdom for weapons. The fact that insight persists across New Game Plus cycles adds another dimension to consider. Your character retains their cosmic knowledge even as the world resets. You begin your next hunt already seeing the amygdalas, already hearing the crying, already understanding the true nature of Yharnam's plight. It's the perfect mechanical representation of the inescapability of knowledge. Once you know something, you cannot unknown it, even if you try to start over. This persistence of insight across cycles also suggests that the player character, like Gehrman, might be trapped in a larger cycle than just the nightly hunt. Each New Game Plus could represent another turn of the wheel, another iteration of the same cosmic drama playing out with minor variations. Your insight accumulates across these cycles, building toward what? Perhaps toward the same fate as every other character who sought too much knowledge, transformation beyond humanity. The multiplayer aspects of insight add yet another layer. Using the beckoning bell or sinister bell costs insight, meaning that connecting with other players requires spending your comprehension. It's as if the game is saying that human connection requires sacrificing some level of cosmic awareness, that you must choose between understanding the universe and understanding other people. The madman's knowledge you gain from successfully invading another player's world suggests that violence and comprehension are linked. To truly understand someone, you must destroy them. As we near the end of this exploration, it's worth considering what Bloodborne is ultimately saying through its insight mechanic. This isn't just a difficulty modifier or a clever way to hide content. It's a fundamental statement about the nature of knowledge, consciousness, and human limitation. The game posits that there are truths too large for human minds to contain, realities too complex for our three-dimensional perception to process, and that attempting to transcend these limitations inevitably leads to transformation or destruction. The player who maintains 99 insight throughout their journey is choosing to experience Bloodborne as a meditation on cosmic horror rather than just a challenging action game. They're choosing to hear the crying, see the watchers, and feel the constant threat of mental breakdown. They're choosing to engage with the game's philosophical questions about the cost of knowledge and the burden of awareness. In real-world terms, Bloodborne's insight mechanic serves as a metaphor for various forms of unwanted knowledge. The person who learns too much about global suffering, who becomes too aware of systemic injustices, who delves too deeply into existential philosophy, they all experience a form of real-world insight buildup. The game asks whether there's value in this knowledge if it only brings suffering, whether truth is worth pursuing if it destroys the pursuer. The brilliance of setting the maximum at 99 rather than around 100 suggests incompletion, that even at maximum insight, there's still something more to understand, some final revelation that remains just out of reach. This matches the experiences of characters like Willem and Micolash, who achieved tremendous insight but died still seeking more, still believing that one more revelation would make everything make sense. As we reach the conclusion of this deep dive into Bloodborne's most fascinating mechanic, consider what your own relationship with insight says about how you engage with the game. Do you maintain high insight for the challenge and the complete experience? Do you spend it quickly to avoid the complications? Do you moderate it, keeping just enough to see some truths while avoiding the worst effects? Each approach reflects a different philosophy about knowledge and its value. The true horror of 99 Insight isn't the mechanical difficulty it adds to the game. It's not the frenzy vulnerability or the crying baby or even the visible amygdalas. The true horror is the realization that this is what the world of Bloodborne actually looks like. All the comfortable lies are stripped away. The cosmic entities that manipulate reality are visible. The suffering of dead gods echoes through the streets. The helpful creatures that guide you are revealed as cogs in an incomprehensible machine. And you, the hunter who sought pale blood to transcend the hunt, discover that transcendence means becoming something that can no longer be called human in any meaningful sense. Bloodborne, through its insight mechanic, achieves something remarkable in gaming. It makes knowledge itself a source of horror. Not the content of knowledge, but the act of knowing, the state of awareness, the burden of comprehension. At 99 Insight, you haven't mastered the game. You've allowed the game to master you, to transform you into someone who sees too much, knows too much, understands too much to ever be comfortable again. The crying never stops. The amygdalas never leave. The truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. This is what really happens at 99 Insight. You become a witness to the true nature of reality, and that witness bears a cost that no amount of blood echoes can repay. You've gained eyes on the inside, as Master Willem wanted, but those eyes see only horror, only the vast, uncaring cosmos that regards humanity as less than insects, barely worth noticing except as subject for experimentation or sources of entertainment. And yet, players choose this. They accumulate insight, maintain it, seek it out. Because perhaps the ultimate message of Bloodborne is that even knowing the horrible truth, even understanding the cost, the human drive to know, to understand, to comprehend, is stronger than the instinct for self-preservation. We are all students of Byrgenwerth in the end, descending into the chalice dungeons of our own curiosity, seeking truths that we know will destroy us, unable to stop ourselves from looking, from learning, from gaining insight until we, too, are transformed beyond recognition. Thank you for joining me on this exploration into one of gaming's most psychologically complex mechanics. If this deep dive into the true cost of forbidden knowledge resonated with you, please consider subscribing to Keen 7 Lore. Your support makes these investigations into gaming's darkest and most fascinating corners possible, and I'm grateful for every one of you who chooses to seek these truths alongside me. Remember, in Yharnam and in life, sometimes the real question isn't what we can know, but what we should know, and whether any knowledge is worth the price of our humanity. Until next time, fellow lore seekers, may you find your worth in the waking world, and may your insight never burden you more than you can bear.